All right, welcome everyone. It is another beautiful day. We are officially into September. I hope everyone had a great Labor Day, right? And we are here with egelloC Financial Aid. We're going to be talking a little bit about the CSS profile today. I'm going to try to give you guys an in-depth look into it, some general information as well, right? Now, the title of today's kind of training here is CSS profile, what it is, how does it help slash hurt you? I took out the help because it doesn't really ever help, right? But again, if you guys can help me out by putting your child's grade in the chat, or if you're the student putting your grade in the chat, that would be very helpful so that we can understand who is here today. Okay. But just a little bit about kind of what we'll be going over today. We're going to go over some financial aid news, right? We're going to do a quick flash to the past about kind of like some things that have been happening with financial aid, with the CSS profile, the college board, colleges getting sued because of the information they use from the CSS profile, right? We'll take a look at what it looks like now, and we'll talk about some of the pitfalls. Okay. For those of you guys that don't know me, right? My name's Coach David, right? I know I don't have the nice hair that I do have in this picture. I'm wearing a hat today, but you'll soon come to realize that I am always in this hat. Okay. But I'm a former law school and college admissions reader, right? I used to be a lawyer. Now I am a college admissions and financial aid kind of expert, right? And I'm ready to help your family save money. So let's get a little bit further into kind of like what we're going to be talking about today. Again, for those of you guys that don't know, our old name was Financial Aid Secrets. We have changed our name to egelloC Financial Aid, right? This is our new logo. So if you guys see stuff from here, it is from me, okay? Now, financial aid news, right? So there's a couple pieces I want to talk about. We'll do a little bit of a flashback to the past before we kind of go into the CSS profile so that we can kind of give you some context a little bit. Okay. Now, the new news, first, like kind of this week, is that politics has further invaded education. Okay. Now, I'm sure you guys have been hearing a lot of stuff about the Department of Education, just, funding in general, like this and that, right? Federal government is pushing their weight around, right? Um, uh, Quick question here. Um, so if you're already part of our program, we're going to be sending out an email pretty soon, so don't worry about it. We're going to have everything's one-on-one. This is just a public training session, so no, you don't need to necessarily be here. Okay. But going back to the financial aid news, right? Politics has further invaded education, right? So just recently, the Trump administration sued the state of Illinois, right? They had just passed a kind of new bill that would allow in-state tuition for undocumented students that were residents of Illinois, right? Now, again, this has a lot of political kind of, background to it, right? So I'm not going to get into the politics, right? I'm not taking a political stance here, but this does beg the question, what will happen to permanent residents? What will happen to visa holders, right? Now, the reason why this kind of like caught my attention is because California has long been a state where visa holders were granted in-state tuition if they've been here for, the statutory amount of time, been in California, right? So I don't know what's going to happen. Maybe first it's undocumented students, then it's visa holders, then it's permanent residents. I'm not sure what is going to happen, right? But it seems like states are fighting back against the federal government because they're trying to take a stand somewhere, drawing a line in the sand somewhere again, right? But we'll have to wait and see what happens in California, in other states, kind of what is going to happen across the nation, okay? Now, just generally speaking, right? I don't know what's going to happen next, right? I've made my predictions over the past couple months, but we'll see what does come out, right? If there's any breaking news, I'll try to share it in our different groups as well. Okay. Now, before we kind of get into the training, I have this quick message, but I also did want to remind our families about some things that have happened with the CSS, the College Board, with financial aid over the past year. Okay. So, in basically about a year ago from today, right, there was a lawsuit filed claiming that colleges used information that was provided by the CSS profile, which we'll get into later today, right, to kind of basically create a system and situation where families were getting less financial aid. And this was based on the College Board getting information about non-custodial parents, right? So this is a situation that arises a lot with families that have separated parents, divorced parents, so on and so forth, right? Now, the reason why this became such an issue, right, is because the CSS profile, even if you're not living with dad, right, even if you're not living with mom, right, whatever the situation is, it asks about financial information about that other person, right? Now, if you think about it, right, if there is a situation where, a single parent is raising a student, they are taking care of all of the expenses, things like that, right? But they're asking for the financial information of another parent that does not contribute to that, the kind of child rearing expenses, then the income for that family will go up. The colleges were kind of alleged, right? And I have to use the word alleged because, the court case isn't actually over, they were alleged to be using both parents' financial information to make their financial aid determination when they shouldn't have been, right? Now, again, the case is still ongoing, but there are, I think it was 18 colleges that have settled this matter outside of court, right? For a total of roughly around $250 million. Now, of course, if they settle, doesn't necessarily mean that they were guilty, but why would they settle unless they were? Right? So again, I know that in the American legal system, everyone is presumed innocent until guilty, right? But right, there's a very clear indication that there were a lot of top level kind of schools that had basically, right, um, basically not been able to prove otherwise, that they were basically taking people for a ride when it came to their financial aid, right? And how much they were being given. Okay. Now, again, we'll have to see how this actually pans out. There's actually another lawsuit that's currently ongoing with another group of colleges, a lot of the same colleges, alleging very similar things as well, right? So I'll definitely keep you updated if anything comes of that, right? But let's get into the training after this quick message, right? Now, one of the big things that I always tell our families is yes, paying for college, important. But first, before we can decide how to pay for it, we do need to get in. So this is literally like the last call, right? For our class of 2026 students. If you have a senior and they have not started their essays, they have not created their applications, they're not doing anything, you need to talk to us really, really, really as soon as possible. Okay. We can help your students, right? We have different programs with different amounts of touch points, right? Depending on what your student needs. But if you are thinking about getting some help for your student, this is the time. You don't want to wait until October, November, a week before. Every single year, you will be very surprised to hear this, but every single year, like a week before the deadlines, right? We're like, oh, we need some help with our applications. And we're like, no, sorry, not going to help you, right? There's not enough time to go over things for you, right? So make sure to talk to our team if you do have a 2026 student, right? If you do have questions, you can text us at 949-775-0865, right? Just text us help or college, right? So that we can get you to the appropriate team to help you with your college admissions. Okay. You can also book it on your own by going ahead and scanning this QR code. So I'm going to give families like 5-10 seconds to go ahead and do that, right? So you can either take a screenshot, take a picture real quick, do whatever you need to do. But if you do need help and your family is a senior, please reach out to us ASAP. Okay. So just 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, let's move on. So today we're going to be talking about the CSS profile. So let me give you a little bit of background information. Okay. Now, the CSS, you're probably thinking, what is that? Right? Now, the CSS is kind of like the counterpart to the FAFSA. The FAFSA might be something that you are more kind of familiar with, right? They are two different systems and they are there to kind of basically do the same thing, right? Basically, they're there to find places where they can basically tell you no. Okay. So I always call like the FAFSA the evil brother, but I think a more apt kind of like analogy is that the FAFSA is like this baby cute, like this cute baby wolf on the left, right? The CSS profile is the full grown version that you don't want to be next to. Okay. So you can think about kind of the FAFSA, it's a watered down version. The CSS is the full thing. Okay. So that's how you can think about the difference between the two. Now, the realistic differences, right? The realistic differences between the FAFSA and the CSS profile is that the CSS profile goes a lot deeper into your life. Okay. That includes retirement, right? The FAFSA does not do that, right? But just look at like, hopefully this is big enough on your screen to like so you can actually read it. But let's take a look here. The FAFSA, what it looks like, what it looks at is the income tax returns, right? Bank accounts, educational savings plans, right? They also look at kind of like your income taxes exemptions, bank accounts, liquid investments, investments in real estate, tax deferred retirement contributions, and family businesses or farms. That's all that the FAFSA is going to look at. The CSS profile looks at all of that. Plus, they look at the equity in your family home. Realistically, the schools that use the CSS profile, they are actually looking at your market value. They're not looking at the equity. Let's not lie about it. They're going on Redfin, they're going on Zillow, they're looking up how much your home is actually worth. They also look at medical spending accounts. They look at sibling assets held in parents' name, right? They look at sibling, kind of like costs, right? And expenses as well. They look at your total retirement savings. So while the FAFSA does not care about qualified, retirement savings, the CSS does. They also care about non-retirement annuities and other valuables, right? Now, if you own, I don't know, art or things like that, they will also ask about that. So it goes way deeper and it considers way more of your assets when it comes to determining your financial aid. Okay. Now, let's take a look here. We have a question here, and it's kind of like along the line, so I'll answer it. It says, with a 2027 graduate, or with a 2027 graduate, when do we start the FAFSA and the CSS? So, very simply, right, the financial aid, like filling out the forms, will start in the fall of your student's senior year. Okay. Now, when do we start with our students? We try to start in the summer. We got a little bit delayed this year, so we're going to be starting in the next week or so. But the forms actually don't open until October, so no need to really worry. Okay. But you would do it in the fall of your senior year, whatever grade you are. Okay. Now, the next question, who runs the CSS profile, right? It is actually a company that you have probably seen before. It is the College Board, okay? They are the organization that makes the SAT. They are also the people that do the AP testing, okay? So if your student has taken an AP test or an SAT or a PSAT, they have a College Board account already, right? So it's run by the same company, right? The CSS profile is used by over 400 colleges, right? A lot of people think that FAFSA is the end of the road, right? I actually just had a consultation with the family. And they're like, yeah, don't worry about it. I got FAFSA. And I'm like, yeah, there's also other things like CSS profile, iDoc. Each school has its own portal. And they're like, what are you talking about? It's just FAFSA. And I'm like, sorry, it's not, right? So there's a lot of misinformation out there. There's also, again, at a consultation that I have previously today, they said, oh, based on my income, I don't need to do the CSS profile. And I was like, what do you mean? If a school requires the CSS profile, you need to fill it out. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about it, right? But how you fill it out and what you do on it can change the complexion of your financial aid. Okay. Now we are going to go down this rabbit hole and kind of look over the CSS profile. Okay. There's a lot of information here. I'm going to try to get through as much as possible and kind of point out as many things as possible. But I'm not going to do it in slides. So instead, right, what I'm actually going to do is kind of like outline what they're going to be asking about, and then we're going to go to the website. But again, they ask for a lot of information. There are so many pages on here that you need to fill out. I'm going to start at the beginning, go all the way to the end. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get all the way to the end, but I'll go as far as I can, right? So there's personal information, parental information, housing, residence, academic information, parent details, parent income, child support, housing information, parent assets, parent expenses, household summaries, right? Student income, assets, and special circumstances. Now, within all of these categories, there's like 3, 4, 5 questions that they ask. And then based on your yeses or nos, there's additional questions that pop out as well. Okay. So there's a lot of questions here, right? I believe it's about 5 times as many questions as the FAFSA, right? So what we're going to do now is we're going to actually go to the website. So unlike, I know this is something we haven't done before. So hopefully it works out well. Okay. I'm actually going to go into my own CSS profile and show you from start to finish what it actually looks like. Okay. But it might take me a second to log in. So give me a second, right? All right. So I need to receive an email for a second. So just give me 1 second here. All right. All right. So we are now in. Okay. So this is what it looks like. The CSS profile, it hasn't really changed over the course of the last I don't know, decade at least, right? The kind of design might have changed a little bit, but not nothing else so much, right? Now, if you actually look, there are, what is it, 7 sections? No. There are 10 sections? No. There are 17 sections that we need to fill out. Okay. And each section has multiple questions, right? So we're going to just start from the beginning so I give you a full rundown. Okay. So the first thing they have you like, say yes to whatever this is, right? And then they ask you about your legal name. Legal name, Coach, right? Last name, David, right? So I am Coach David. All right. And so again, this part is easy, right? It's just personal information. You go ahead and put all your phone numbers, you put in your email address, right? You go ahead and put in your birthday, right? Here you put in your marital status, right? This is for the student, right? And so I'm going to act like a student, like I was born in 2008, right? They ask you where you are a resident of, what state, right? They ask you to confirm, you move on, okay? Then they ask you these questions, okay? They ask your citizenship status, right? If you are a U.S. citizen, you choose that. U.S. eligible non-citizen, right? So if you're a permanent resident, right? If you're a permanent resident or you have a conditional permanent residency, right? You hold a I-94, so basically you've been granted asylum, right? Or if you're kind of any of these other things apply, then you can go ahead and choose eligible non-citizen, right? Canadian, right? Some schools do give financial aid to kind of international students from Canada, right? I almost said Canada, right? But from Canada. And then other, right? These would be kind of other students, right? If you are a kind of international student, or if you have been granted deferred action, or you're undocumented. Okay. So we'll go ahead there, right? Oh, let me go ahead back and click US citizen, right? Because that's what I am. Now, the next thing they ask about kind of your status, right? They ask, do you have your own dependents? I do not have children yet, so no, right? Veteran of the armed forces, I am not, right? Determined to be an emancipated minor, right? Just because your kid moved out, doesn't mean that they're emancipated minor. It needs to be by a court order, okay? A court order needs to say that this student is now emancipated. All right, so keep that in mind. I was not, right? Coach is homeless or at risk of becoming homeless. No, right? So we click continue, right? They ask about like foster care, ward of the state. I was neither, right? Again, if you were, you go ahead and click yes, right? And then you go ahead and you say, well, again, it's just all personal information, address, right? 123 ABC Street, right? Sesame, like, and I live in Sesame, right? And California, 12345, right? So this is all easy information. Again, if you do have a kind of like social security number, you'll go ahead and put it in here. Okay. Now, if you're an international student, or if you're, here on a visa, right? Then you might also have like an ITIN number, right? For some students, you can also put that in here as well, right? If you're applying for financial aid at a school that gives financial aid to international students, right? This one, you're not going to have one until you actually turn one in, so don't worry about that, right? Then they're going to ask you about demographics, right? And it's basically going to ask you to confirm all this information is correct. You'll click save and continue, right? And then you're basically done there. They're gonna also gonna ask about your parents, right? So for my father, his name is Hello There, and mother is I'm David. Okay. So again, if you have one parent, you'll go ahead and just have one parent, right? But later they will ask you to confirm and kind of tell us the situation, right? So here it says you provide information for only one biological or adoptive parent. What situation best describes coach's second parent, right? So parent deceased, right? They're incarcerated, student has no contact with parent, right? There's a lot of different situations here, right? If you have questions on this, please come talk to me about your specific situation. I'll help you out there, right? But for this one, I'm just going to say that we don't have any contact. Okay. Now, what country does Hillel live in? That's my father. We'll just go ahead and say United States, right? Current education information. What is my grade level for the 2024-25 year? I'm going to act like I'm a senior, so I'm going to say 12th grade. Or this is last year's. The new one's not out yet. So I'll just still say 12th grade, thinking that I am a senior last year, right? Current high school information, they'll ask about kind of your, like where you're going to school, right? I'll just put in my own kind of high school, right? So I went to Camp Lindo in Moraga, California, right? Um, it's a public school, so I didn't get any scholarships. I didn't pay for anything, right? They'll ask you questions about the 2025-6 year, right? I put one school in here just to show you guys, but you basically what you're going to do is go and put like school in, right? I'll also put like UPenn in, for instance, right? So we'll go ahead and click select there, right? Here, right? First year undergraduate, right? Uh, I haven't applied yet, so I don't know my ID number, right? Whenever you're clicking on the housing plans, I always click on campus because on campus living is always the most expensive, right? And then depending on how you applied, I'll just say that I'm going to apply regular decision, right? And so then we added in that school, we're moving on. Okay. So up until now, it's pretty like self-explanatory, right? Now they're going to ask about parents, right? They're going to ask birthdays, right? Emails, all these different pieces, right? Again, please keep in mind that there's only certain required questions, right? Now, as far as kind of, the social security numbers, if you are looking to get financial aid, it does speed up the process a little bit and helps the school match. So you might want to put those in, but everything else is not required, right? So next, this is where kind of like we talk about kind of different pieces, right? But parent tax return status, right? Completed, estimated will file, not filed, right? So depending on your situation, most parents are filing their taxes, right? Most are doing a 1040, right? They're also going to ask you how you're filing here because I said that it's just one parent. We'll just say head of household, right? And then they're going to ask you information here. They ask you about your adjusted gross income. Okay. Now, this next question is not required. So, do you answer it? No, right? So I'm just going to put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? That is how much income I have, right? Based on the, and so, well, I'm going to go back, right? So if your income is under $100,000, you will be eligible for a waiver. If your income is not under $100,000, then you will not be eligible for a waiver. So if you actually look here, it won't give me that option anymore, right? Now, here, it asks if you filed any of the following. It's not required. Skip, right? Enter the following information for 2023. Okay. So this is required. None of these are required. So I'm just going to put a random number, right? Here, none of this is required. Do not answer, right? These, not required. Do not answer, right? These, not required. Do not answer, okay? Now, you see that this is a very common theme that I'm going through here. The information that you provide on here, only so many questions are required. This, not required. Skip. Do you see how it's letting me skip through? Federal taxes paid, unfortunately, required. So we have to put something in here, right? How much did Hello earn from work, right? Again, your wages, right? It's required. So we'll put it in, right? Tax deferred pension retirement savings plans, these are required. So we have to put something in. Next questions, not required, right? Alimony reported, right? Or received, right? And then other housing allowances. Again, most people don't have housing allowances, right? So we should be good there. Other untaxed income, again, required. Just put something like, again, put in that number, right? And then they're asking about the amounts for kind of like the 2024 year. This is all information that you should be able to find on your tax return, okay? And then untaxed income, if you have it, great. Like you put it in here. If you don't have it, that's fine, right? So I'll just fill it in there, right? And then expected changes, right? Now, for the expected changes, right? If there is a chance that something might happen, you might as well tell them about it, right? Maybe you've seen that your company's downsizing, right? Maybe you've seen this, that, so on and so forth. If you have seen those things, go ahead and click yes, right? And then they will ask you, well, what do you think it looks like in the coming year, right? And then they're just asking you to estimate. So, like, if you're going to lose your job, if you feel like, right, again, feel like, right, you're going to lose your job halfway through the year, well, then just put what half your income would be, right? So on and so forth, right? Again, they're asking you to kind of predict the future. Who can really do that with 100% certainty, right? They also ask you about benefits, right? So if you are any part of any of these programs, you don't go ahead and click, right? Again, here as well, right? Parent employment intro, right? Again, not required. This next section, right, is required, right? Have you been in the armed forces? So again, yes or no, right? I was not, right? And my parents were not, right? Then they ask you, what is your occupation, right? How many years have you worked there, right? Not required, okay? They also ask about retirement plans. Again, not required. Okay. They also ask about current value of tax deferred after tax retirement pensions, this, that, so on and so forth, right? This is required. There are different areas where, and they ask for certain plans. Okay. So again, make sure that you're giving them the least amount of information possible, right? So they asked about these ones. If you have something outside of this, don't tell them about it, right? If your retirement plan is you've been filling your mattress with $100 bills for the past 15 years, well, that's not something that they ask about here, do they? Right? So I wouldn't add those funds in. Okay. And then they ask you about housing information. Okay. They say like are you and the students like address the same? They'll click yes, right? Then they ask kind of what are you currently doing here, right? Now, even if it's for a little bit while you're filling out this form, it might make sense for you to rent or live with others because, right? If you do, then look at what happens, right? They're going to ask, right? Or let me put it this way. The CSS asks you about like your kind of like family situation, like where you're currently living. If you click own home, right? One of the things that's going to happen is that they're going to ask about like the market value. They're going to ask about the equity, how much money you have tied up in your home, right? If they say that there is, let me put it this way, right? They say that they look at the equity of your home, right? The equity of your home is how much money you have poured into it, right? So let's say that you bought $1 million house, right, in California, right? Let's say that you put $250,000 down, right, and you've paid off, I don't know, let's say $50,000 of it. So there's $300,000 of equity in your house. That's the question that they should be asking. But why do they ask you about the current market value of your home? Anybody, right? It doesn't make any sense. Why would they ask you about the market value when they just want to know about the equity? That's why I'm saying the colleges are they're I don't know what the word I'm looking for. They're trying to get people to not qualify, right? By using market value kind of valuations, right? So let's say you bought your house, I don't know, 15 years ago, right? And so now, right, your $1 million house is now worth $2.6 million. Now they're saying, oh, well, you got equity on top of what you bought it at. So you have your $250,000 plus your $50,000 that you've paid in, like paid off, right? Plus now you have an extra $1.6 million. So now you have $1.9 million in equity. But that equity cannot be realized until what? You sell your house, right? So when they talk about equity, like again, this current market value, I always tell people when you're filling out this section, the market value should be the value that your county's tax assessor makes you pay taxes on. That is the number that is officially there on record. Okay, so keep that in mind there. Okay, I'll just put some random things in here so we can get to the next page. If it'll get me to the next page. I'll say that my purchase year is 2008 during the bubble. Okay, so let's move on, right? They're also going to ask about other people that are part of your household. Okay, now if there are people that you take care of, right? Add them in, right? Grandma, grandpa, you send them, $3,000 each month, right? Then let's talk about it, right? If you have a sibling, obviously you want to put that in too, right? If auntie and uncle are living with you, right? You might want to talk about that too, right? Again, they're not saying what is on your tax return. They're just saying how many people are dependents, people that you take care of. Okay. So keep that in mind there. Okay. All right. They also ask about child support. Again, required question. I didn't receive child support, right? Didn't pay child support, right? Parent expenses, right? So this is another section that we have a little bit kind of room to kind of like say, hey, there was a lot of money that went out last year, right? So they ask about medical or dental expenses. This, unfortunately, this is the only thing that they ask about, right? So if you click yes, there's going to be an additional question, right? How much was not covered by insurance, right? So if your kid was getting braces, not covered by insurance, that's 10 grand that's down the drain, right? Your kid is going to have straight teeth, but it's 10 down, 10 grand gone, right? And then again, like how much are you going to pay in 2024? Again, estimates, right? Right? And then they ask, do you have any of the following expenses? Repayment of college loan debt, right? But this is already on your tax return, so I don't know why they're asking again, right? But if you actually see, none of these are required either, so you can skip all these, right? Parent assets. This is where we can start getting into a little bit of a kind of gray areas, right? So the question asks current amount in cash, savings, checking, and deposit accounts. Okay. So Realistically, if you transferred all your money to someone else, right, you wouldn't have any money here. So read between the lines when I'm talking about this. You don't necessarily need to put the exact values that you have. Okay. They also ask about kind of investments, right? And again, these are required. Do you have investments? Yes, right. Well, okay, we have something there. If you have rentals, right? Again, it's on your tax return. You have to click it. Do you operate a business? If you have one, you have to click yes. Own part of a farm? Yes, right? So if you click these, they're going to go ahead and kind of ask you more questions later. But they also ask, are there assets held in the names of the children? Okay. This is one of the reasons why I tell you, do not do those things like buy a house, like a rental house, and then put your kids on it, right? It's not beneficial, right? Because if you have to click yes to this question, they're gonna ask more and more and more, right? They ask about the current value, market value of your investments, right? Now, I know the stock market took a tumble a couple months back, right? For the purposes of financial aid, that's good, right? For the purposes of your wallet, it's not good, right? So obviously that is something to keep in mind here. Okay, let's just go ahead and put a random number here, right? Number of real estate properties. Again, if you have them, you have to put them here, right? So I'll put one, right? Then they're going to ask you to tell you more about the extra real estate that you have, right? And again, why are they asking about the dang market value? I don't get it, right? Um, so, make sure that you kind of focus on that, right? Now I'm going to go back here so that I can remove it, right? Number of businesses owned, let's just go ahead and put one. Again, gets deeper and deeper into your life, right? And again, they'll ask you about questions like that. Okay. Number of farms, I'll put zero, right? Then they're going to ask about the student's income, right? If you filed, great. If you didn't, if your student didn't work or things like that, then you just click not filed. But they're still going to ask you about wages. This is kind of dumb, right? But if you didn't file, well, I mean, I guess there's two situations. You might not have made enough to file taxes, right? Or you didn't work at all, right? But again, if you didn't work at all, just put zero, go through these questions here. Okay. There's a lot of questions. Sorry, let me get through these. Okay. And you'll realize again, same thing here. There's a lot of questions that are not required. Okay. So keep that in mind. They'll ask about assets, right? Hopefully your student doesn't have anything, right? Because if the student does have something, then it's they kind of take the value of it and then like take 20%. That's what they can go ahead and do. There's also additional questions that each school is going to ask. Like Stanford asks additional questions like, what are you going to study, right? What is your, first career objective? And then you will get to the end. Okay. Now, I literally didn't fill anything out, and it still took me like a long time to just click through this and explain it to you. Okay. Now you need to go find all that information. This is not an easy form. Everything that you click yes to is going to bring more problems to your front door. Okay. Now, I wanted to make sure to show this to you so that we can make sure to kind of keep you on the right track, right? But let's kind of go back to our slideshow here and see, like, again, what the takeaways are. Okay. Now, there is a question here and it says, I'll be using my 2025 taxes. I don't own a house, but I have cash in the bank. Would it hurt if I purchase a house in the 2025 year? Yes, right? Because now you're going to have equity, right? Realistically, for your kind of like the cash that's sitting in your account, right? I always tell people, right? They ask about a lot of different kind of retirement accounts and things like that, investments. They ask about, cash, check, your cash, checking or savings accounts, but they don't ask about gold, right? So if you just take your money and buy gold bars and then put them in the safe at home, well, you got money there, right? But it's not really what they're asking about. So technically, you can say you have nothing in your checking account or savings account, right? So again, the questions, there is room for interpretation. So I want to make sure that you guys are interpreting in the right way. Okay. Now, one of the things that I will say here, right, is that the takeaway is this, right? Volunteering information is not the right way. There was literally like dozens of pages that I skipped through because they were not required, right? So here's the takeaway from today. Giving every piece of information does not make colleges feel more generous. It makes them more greedy to take more of what you have, right? And again, the CSS profile may be a requirement for some schools, but when you turn it in and what you turn in is your choice, right? Remember that until they formally ask for something, you do not really need to give them anything, right? The big takeaway from today in capitals at the bottom, do not, I repeat, do not volunteer any piece of information that you do not need to. Okay. Please keep that in mind. All right. Now, results, right? I always go over these results, so I'm going to skim through them, right? This family, 350, right? I was able to save them 30, 35, $37,000 from private, like smaller private schools. This family makes over 400. I was able to save them 40 grand from Baylor, right? This family, I was able to save them over $30,000. Their family income is around 230, right? So I have been able to get results for our families, okay? So if you are interested in talking to me, there is a QR code. There's also a phone number you can text us at, right? All you have to do is, text us at 650-860-5201. You can just type in money, right? Text money to that phone number and we'll help you out. You can also book your own call on that QR code there, right? But I did also want to make sure that we opened it up for questions because I know that after I go over one of these things, everyone has questions because they see what's required, what's not required, so on and so forth. So at this time, I want to open it up for questions, right? So in either in the chat or in the Q&A, wherever you feel comfortable, right? You can also set up the settings so that when you're typing something in the chat and sending it, it just comes to me so I can see it, right? If you're a little bit more shy, right? Or you can send it to the Q&A that no one can see any of the questions in there either. Okay. But I'm gonna take a drink of water, give you guys a little time to type your questions, and then we'll make sure that we answer them before we leave today. Okay. All right. But when the new FAFSA opens, we will also, let me check the calendar. Maybe it's actually like on our, I doubt it's actually on our, oh, you know what? It might be. Ooh, so the technical open date of the FAFSA is 10/1, right? Do I think it's actually going to open then? I'm not 100% sure, but it's actually on a Wednesday. So on October 1st, I will be going over the new FAFSA, right? I don't think anything is gonna have changed, right? But we'll check and kind of see. Okay. So we'll definitely do that. Okay. All right. I'm not really seeing any questions, right? So I'll kind of like go over this like one more time. The QR code takes you straight to the link so you can book a consultation with me, right? If you are a 26 class of 2026, you're way late in talking to me. Set one up now. If you cannot find a time, text our team at 650-860-5201 because I am literally booked out for 2-3 weeks right now, right? But if you cannot find a time, reach out to our team. I will try to squeeze you in if you're a 2026 student, right? If you're 2027, we need to talk before the end of the year because there might be some tax things that we need to do. Okay. So, class of 26, class of 27, you're kind of on the clock right now. Okay. If you are a younger student, well, you should probably sign up with us because our prices are actually going up in about 2 weeks. And once they do go up, well, even after the discount, it's not cheaper than what it would be right now. Okay. Please go ahead and reach out there. Okay. All right. We have a question here. It says, "Can you state that you have dependents other than your children if you don't actually live either you do they?" So if you have like elderly parents that you're taking care of and they're in a different country, then yes, you can call them your dependents, right? They're not talking about legal on your tax return dependents. They just asked about dependents. Who are you taking care of, right? So if that's the case, then yes, you can, even if they don't necessarily live with you, right? Because well, what if your like elderly parents were living in an assisted living home and you're paying for it? Are they not your dependents? No, they are still, right? So keep that in mind. Okay. All right. So I'll leave this up for a couple minutes so that you guys can go ahead and, take pictures, do whatever you need to do. And then we'll kind of end off today. Okay, so we have another question here. It's like, okay, so looks like it's a separated parent situation. Dad pays child support through the support bureau. Will he have to provide his information? So these are the situations that I was talking about when like the basically the colleges are using information from both sides, even though like dad is not necessarily part of the kids' lives necessarily, right? And that is what the lawsuit is about right now, right? Um, so, um, especially for you, right? If you can go ahead and sign up for a consultation, we need to talk a little bit more about the situation, and then I'll show you what your options are, right? Again, our consultations are free. We never charge for them. We talk to you. I had like 6 consultations today. Half of them, I was like, sorry, I can't really help you, or I was like, you don't need my help. You can do it on your own, right? And then the other half are like, yeah, I can help you, and you need my help. Okay, so please sign up for a consultation, right? Even if you think that you can't afford our services or this or that, that's okay, right? I still want to give you information. Okay. If you don't overshare, what do they actually check? Well, that depends. It depends on the schools. Every school is very particular in what they want to see, right? So they might not ask for anything additional, or they might ask for other things, right? But that's why we need to have a strategy in place about how we're going to kind of do things. Okay. If they ask for proof of bank info, how many months of statements will they ask? I've never seen a school ask for it, so don't worry about it. Okay. It says, would it be better to purchase a house in 2026 instead of 2025, or would that not be an advantage? So the first year, if your kid's at 2027 and you're asking which year it's better to buy it in, if you had to buy a home, it'd be better to do it in 26, right? Because the first year is the most critical year. That's when they set your baseline. So I would rather see it then. Okay. It says, when you report student income, is it based on current salary or is it based on the tax return? Student income, mm, well, I mean, students are still minors, right? So it's very hard to see or like to see a situation where they would have a salary, right? Um, but it should be based on the tax year that they have, right? Now, if you have an older student, right, like over the age of, I don't know, 24, then parents, you don't need to be worrying about it because now they are an independent student. But if they are kind of like a high school senior right now, uh, I haven't seen many high school students with an actual salary, right? Okay. Uh, we have here, it says, so where did you say to look up your home's market value, the tax assessor's office? So every year, if you own a home, you'll get like a bill like saying, hey, this is the value of your home. This is what you need to pay taxes on. I would use that value. Okay. It says, does a business considered as an asset even though it doesn't make any benefit from it? So businesses are always assets, like because an asset is just something that you have, right? But whether it's profitable or not, well, that's another story, right? And it says what actual documents do you need to return to submit with the CSS tax returns. So it all depends on the school. Some schools just accept the CSS, right? Whatever form you fill out. Some schools are going to, use IDoc and have you turn in W-2s, 1099s, other trust documents, right? So it really depends on the school, right? So that's why it's so complicated. There's no one answer for everything. Okay. Right, great question. So the questions always flood in when I say I'm going to stop, right? Will they ask for business value? Yes, they will, right? Which is why like businesses don't necessarily help you all the time, right? But if your business value, like looking back at your other question, right? If you're not making any profit from it, well, the business value might be zero or negative even, right? So again, we'll have to see what the situation looks like. But that's why I want you guys to sign up for a consultation. Again, if you are 26, if you are 27 and you can't find a time like soon, please reach out to our team at 650-860-5201. They will find a way to squeeze you into my schedule. Okay. It says, what is the look back period? So they're looking at the tax return from 2 years ago, right? So that's when it always can. It says, can you be legally punished if your information is wrong? If you're blatantly wrong, possibly, right? But if you're just omitting information, different, right? So that's why I'm saying you don't need to volunteer information. If they ask for it later, then you can give it to them later. Okay. All right. So I do need to end off right now, right? But go ahead, make sure you sign up for that consultation so we can talk, find things, and find ways to save you guys money. Okay. Um, okay, one last question, right? In the salary question, my son is 21, right? He gets a salary. He has completed 2 years, will transfer to a private university. Currently more than was filed. Yeah, so your student does need to file taxes. Unfortunately, his income plus your income is going to be used for the purposes of financial aid. Unfortunately, he is not considered an independent student yet. He's only 21. In order to be considered an independent student, they need to be 24 or older. Okay. And then we have, okay, really final question. I do have to go, right? It is, if we do a consult now for 2029, what if the situation changes in 2 years? Well, we'll talk about that during the consultation, right? And then if you do sign up and the situation changes and I'm no longer able to help, well, then I'll just give you a refund. But if I think I can still help, we'll go through the process. Okay. All right, sounds good, guys. If you guys do have any additional questions, please feel free to reach out. I will make a post on Facebook as well if you guys are looking for the replay. And if you guys have anything else, if you're part of our program, reach out in Discord, reach out via email, reach out via Facebook Messenger, whatever way you can. And you can also text our team as well. Okay. So once again, that was 650. I always forget this phone number, 650 860 5201. Okay. I'll talk to you guys again next week and hope everyone has a great weekend. Bye bye.